Hello, and welcome to the OMC Development Blog number 3. My name is Garv, and I'm here to talk a little bit about some things related to OMC things, but also just talk about game development, making things, especially things related to game development, but also things like writing and that kind of thing. So last week we talked a little bit about writing, and so this week we're going to take that a little bit more into the game development side. Last time it was more about the general thought of writing and how to connect those things into games. This time we're going to talk about middleware. Now, first of all, before we get started, let's talk about what middleware actually is. Middleware is software that you use in between the engine you're using and yourself. Basically, it's software that's written by someone else to do a particular task. Now, middleware is pretty common in development, whether you do video games, whether you do general software development or whatever. There's always some middleware that people use. Middleware is actually fairly necessary in some cases, mainly because people and the workforce in general, we can't do everything, right? Sometimes you're living with a small workforce, but you have a lot of work. So when you are dealing with a small workforce and have a lot of work, generally the idea is you want to save some time. So in order to save time, what we usually do is we get some piece of software that someone else developed that we can add to our project to cover some task, to do something that we don't have time to do. Usually they're things that that you can get in order to not reinvent the wheel. So let's take, for example, in my own game, I do not feel like managing controller things. Like if you're looking at every hardware platform that you write your game for, and each one of them has a different way to handle controllers. Now, you can get in there and write every little bit for every little project, for every little hardware thing, but if you think about doing that every time, it's just a pain. So what you can do, especially if, let's say, you're making a game that's going to be on a Mac, it's going to be on a PC, and you're going to have a version for the Nintendo Switch or the Xbox or PlayStation 4 or something. And each one of those handles controllers differently. So what you do is you get some middleware that handles that part of it. So all you need to do is make general calls to a controller, and it will handle, underneath the surface, will handle all controllers across the board. So it doesn't really matter what the person has plugged in, then they'll be able to use it. And that's just an example of some type of middleware that you can use in order to do what you need to do. It saves time, it helps out, it's good. So middleware is never going away because there's always something that people don't want to deal with, whether it's physics, whether it's controllers, whether it's saving your game, those kind of things, especially for things that you don't want to reinvent the wheel. Somebody has already made it, so you don't need to mess around with it. But as cool as it is and as amazing as it can turn out, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always good. Middleware, with all of its benefits and all of the things that come with it, it also comes with a dark side. Now, the thing is, and I don't want to talk bad about middleware developers because, some of them are genuinely trying to do a good job. They're trying to make a good product, they're trying to make money, and they want to have a good reputation about their own product so that people can buy, and they build up a fan base, and that helps them make more money, right? If you have a good project or a good middleware product and you want people to buy and depend on and be happy with your product. So I don't want to take anything away from them, but there is a particular danger to using middleware, and that is you just don't know what's going to happen to the middleware developer. Now, I say this as somebody who has been burned quite a few times by middleware. If you know anything about us, then you know that my game is only made with a couple of people. I mean, the base game is only a couple of people. We decided to use the Unity engine because Unity engine saves a lot of time. Whether you use Unreal or Unity or Gamebryo, whatever it is that you use to run the game, to build the game around. And usually that stuff is pretty well taken care of, and you don't necessarily need to worry about what goes on underneath very often. Once you pick a version, you can pretty much stay there and just build your whole game around that. But there are always things that you need to worry about, and those things crop up as you're making your game. How do you handle characters? Are you doing a first-person shooter, or are you doing a visual novel? Are you doing an RPG strategy game, or whatever it is that you're working on? And so there's always these little things. And of course, if you've got unlimited amounts of time, then you can write all of the parts of your game by yourself and not have to worry about getting some middleware or something. You can just jump right on in, boom, write everything, and you understand everything about what's going on, and that is great. But for those of us who lack manpower, lack time, and especially if you want to get things done in a reasonable amount of time, then you generally will fall onto going to some kind of middleware in order to help speed things along. We don't have to write anything, it's already been written, and so we can just add that to the project and write our code around that and then move on. So middleware developers usually, if you go and you take a look at the Unity asset store, and I'm going to use that as the general basis of this, but whether or not you go to the Unity store or the Unreal store or whatever, you'll see pretty much the same sort of things, and that is people talking about how great their middleware is. Usually they'll have a certain amount of reviews. In the Unity store, they have like a star rating, so people who have used it can rate it, 4 or 5 or 1 up to 5 stars, and so you can kind of get an idea of what people are talking about that particular asset. And those things a lot of times will come with ideas about support, so if you have a problem, then you can contact them for support. And also they'll have documentation on how to use it, forum or Discord or something, so you can go to the place and find out more information. And so those things are great. They're great, but you'll find very, very quickly that there are some people who just are really not good at customer service. They're not good at handling their product. They're not good at handling the customer. They're not good at responding to questions, and they're not good at helping people. And so a lot of times what you'll end up doing is you'll buy some middleware, have a problem, and then say, okay, well, I need to contact the developer of this thing to get more information. And they promise, oh yeah, we have great support. We'll be able to help you out. We'll be able to solve your problem and help you move on so that you're not stuck with this piece of software that doesn't do what you need it to do. And in their defense, everybody's product is different. It's one of those things about when you release software. It works great on your own hardware. The way your hardware is configured, the way it's set up, the amount of memory you have and the cards that you have, you've written it to work on that perfectly fine. However, once the user installs that onto their machine, then you start seeing problems that you didn't see on your own dev build. And it's as your product goes out there, and more people use it, then those things become more apparent, and then you'll just need to build around that. Like once you find those problems, then you can go and fix them. But that's not true for everybody. Some people just are not very good at that. And so if you have a problem, then you'll send an email to the place that they tell you to send an email to. And sometimes you may never hear a response. And sometimes you may hear a response, but it's like 2 weeks later. And what that means for your project is it means that you need things done now. Like, I need to have that problem fixed within the next couple of days. Let's say you have your own milestones, your own deadlines, and your own milestones. So you email this middleware person who makes this middleware because you're having a problem with it. So you email them or write them or get on their Discord or whatever to contact them to find out how to fix this problem. And you follow the instructions as they laid out. But when you actually go and do it, you find out that they don't have a good support structure underneath. So now what do? Because now you're stuck with this middleware in your project that you've already built things around, and you can't fix it. A lot of times the code is under dynamically linked lists, so that means you can't actually get to the code itself to fix it. A lot of times the code is spaghetti code, so you're looking at it and you're going, I have no idea how they wrote this. And so even getting in there trying to fix it, it's written in a way that you just can't fix the problem without untangling the web that is their own code. When it's your own code, it's a lot easier to look at it and go, okay, I know what I was doing, so I can fix it. But when you're looking at somebody else's code, now some people, they do lay their code out nice and organized. You can see what's going on. They've got comments, so you know what's going on. And you can fix things because you can kind of get in there and reverse engineer a little bit and find out what's going on. But then there are lots of people who just write terrible code, and so you're just like, wow, I can't fix this. I don't know how to fix it. So you need to get the developer to help you. And when you try, you can't get a hold of them, or they don't respond quickly, or you're waiting for like 2 or 3 weeks, or that kind of thing. And what this does for your project is it means that you are stuck until they respond. And this is terrible. If I think about my own project, I think I've lost, I don't know how many weeks because I was waiting on some middleware problems. Problem with some middleware, and I was waiting on a response, but I never got one. It's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating, and even though middleware is something that we use fairly often, it still creates this problem where you're just like, when you buy it, you don't know whether or not that's going to be good. Even if you read the comments on the middleware itself, you find that maybe some of the comments were written 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or 6 months ago. And then now, maybe 6 months ago, it was great. But today, it's not. And so you're struggling and you're waiting. So what do you do in those situations? Well, you can wait. That's one option. Or you can rewrite the whole thing. Or you can find another middleware, replace the one that you've used. But if you think about how much time you lose in doing that, it's sometimes staggering, especially if you've built your game around that particular piece of middleware, like all the code that references it, everything that it does for your game. The moment you take that out, then that means now you have to put a new one back in, rewrite something, and then everything around it, everything that is around it has to now be rewritten in order to access it properly, because now you have something new. And that new thing doesn't necessarily handle things the same way the other one that you were using handles things. And this is a point of frustration, because as you are working on your own project and you're trying to figure out, okay, should I use this bit of middleware or that, or this or that? Sometimes there isn't a good solution. Sometimes you look at it and go, okay, that looks fine. The comments of it look great. The person, I've talked to them personally, so I've had a discussion with them, so we've talked, and now I find out that now I've actually paid for it, because unfortunately, as with a lot of things, the marketing side and the actual situation side sometimes are two different things. So your marketing, which is the people trying to sell it to you, those are your sales guys. They're trying to get you to buy it. So they're going to tell you, yeah, everything is great. Don't worry, man. We got this. We have a good support structure. We're going to help you with what you need. It's great. Yeah, go for it. Buy. We're here to help you. And then you buy into that, because, I mean, what else are you going to do? And so you buy into that, but you find out, oh my God, it's actually really not that way. Like, the service is terrible and there's so many bugs to this thing. But none of that is reflected in the reviews. And so you're stuck, and you've already spent all that time to get it into your project, and you're screwed. And so the reason I get into this is because I kind of want to point out, for anybody who's looking to make a game, and you are going to things like the Unity Asset Store or the Unreal Store, and you're looking through all of the stuff that's up there, because there's tons of it, and you're trying to find out what to buy, it's a good idea to think about what this is going to mean for your project in the long run. Like, what happens if they drop out? What are you going to do? You going to rewrite stuff? Do you have a backup plan? So what are you going to do? And so consider these things when you are jumping into that sea of middleware. Now, some middleware has been around forever, and therefore you can safely go in knowing that it's going to be okay, because some of that stuff's been around a long time. So because it's been around a long time, then it's like, oh, well, it's been around for like 20 years. So no worries. They've already worked out the structure. Everything's good. But there's stuff that hasn't been around that long. It's new, maybe 6 months, maybe 2 years. And some stuff that you think, okay, it should be good. You're going to jump in. Now, one pitfall that I would say is sometimes you're looking for something to solve a particular problem, a very specific problem that's not normal. In other words, when I say not normal, I mean you're looking at something that's not, say, control of a character. So you're looking at control options or controller options, like I was talking about earlier, where you just need to be able to handle controllers and you want people to swap in and out of controllers, and so therefore you want something to handle that. Those are kind of, if you're making any kind of game that uses a controller or a keyboard or whatever, because that's how you play games to begin with, this will always be a problem, and therefore it's always something that you'll be able to find something that's going to work. And usually those pieces of software, middleware, are very mature. They've been around a long time. And there's always a couple of really good options that you can use that have been around a long time, and you don't really have to worry about whether or not they're going to work in your project. But that's not quite true for things that are very, very, very specific. Let's take, for example, and I don't want this video to go on too long, but I do want to point out something in my own project. I've had two really, 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 really bad issues with some middleware. I won't get into the names of them because I don't think that it's important to run somebody's name in the ground. And the people who are working on those things, or worked on those things, aren't doing it anymore. And I don't know if they're doing anything else at this point. Well, I know one of them is, but that doesn't affect me. So I'm not here to tell you that these guys are bad. So that's not my point in this. But I do want to share the story because I think that you can understand. First thing, in when we're talking about how long it takes to make software, those kind of issues that have to deal with middleware and all the problems that come with that have to be factored in, because sometimes they affect how long it takes to actually do things, because now you're having to redo things. And also, when I think about what I've been doing for the last week, because this is a development blog about what we've been doing all this time, I think that part is also important, and it connects those two things. So yes, there's the general part of middleware and it's good, but there's also the part of this is something you need to definitely consider. So in the two cases that I was mentioning, I want to say that I went into both of them in the beginning of those the beginning of the life of both of those projects, mainly because I needed a very, very specific niche field, and there are just not a lot of options. Sometimes in those particular niches, there's just not a lot of options. You find that a lot of people will either pick a character or pick a thing, and they'll just roll with that, and they won't mess around with all the things that go around in the middle of that. They'll just pick that thing and then just move on, because not picking that thing, it's simple, and it's a lot of times in your early life, you want something simple so that you can just move on, right? You don't want to spend a whole lot of time working on that stuff. So in this case, it was the early life of those products, and I jumped in with the idea that those things would help me solve some problems and save some time. But in both cases, because this happened in both, what ended up happening is the beginning is fine. And in the beginning, when I first started using them, they were fine. Like, everything worked. I didn't have any real issues with the beginning part. But it's as time goes on and they make updates, or Unity makes updates, or Unreal makes updates, or whatever, and those things break, and or your needs change. In both cases, the product was already on shaky ground in the beginning. So I'm not going to say that both of these products were 100% perfect, because they weren't. But I was willing to deal with that issue because they were small at the time. But as time goes on, I realized that those issues were getting to be more and more of a problem. So I contacted the people and I said, hey, I need this problem solved. And initially they were like, yeah, no problem, dude. We got this. We're going to get you a build out in the next couple days. So don't worry about it. We got it covered. Time goes on. Never hear back from the guys. And to make a long story short, I waited a long time. And one of the groups, they were a relatively big group. And so there was, when I jumped in originally, I jumped in with the idea that, wow, these guys are going to really, really knock it out of the park. They're going to bring, and that ball's gone, and we're going to be going, because it was such a good piece of work, or the idea was great, that in the long term, other people will be able to really benefit from this. But truth be told, it wasn't handled properly. They never met deadlines. They talked about problems that were going to be solved, but those problems were never really solved. We waited for updates over and over, long periods of time. And it wasn't just me, it was a group of us. I mean, as I said, this particular thing was really interesting and solved a problem that those of us who wanted characters you could change their outfits and shape them however you want. It really solved that niche, and it was great. And especially since that particular niche, if you're a small group like me, or you've got a massive amount of work and you just want to solve that problem without having to spend a whole lot of money, or even if you have to even throw a little money at it, then it's still a good way to go. But ultimately what happened is they just never met any of the promises, and we waited, and sometimes 6 months, 8 months, never heard anything. Now you could think, okay, Garv, why didn't you just go dump that thing and just do something else? Well, the main issue is because it was a niche product. Because it was niche, it solved a really, really specific issue, and I had already built my whole code base around that particular issue. It was something that if I was going to change it, if I was going to fix it, it was going to effectively kill my whole project. Like, whole game dead. Because it was just that ingrained into the overall scope of the game and the way that things were written. I admit that, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but in the beginning I was all excited, I could do X, Y, and Z, and I thought, wow, that's so amazing, like we'll be able to do all this stuff. But in the end, because everything was built around it, then that means that if I wanted to change it or fix it or remove it, then it would effectively kill my game. And so that's the real danger of middleware. And ultimately, what ended up happening with both of these is they ended up becoming abandonware. The people who had worked on them never met the promises. The customer service was bad. They in the end, all trust gone. And for what, really? They took something that I feel like was good. The concept was good and great, and then they couldn't handle the service of it. They couldn't meet their deadlines. They couldn't do any of that. And they promised, and then ultimately we got nothing. In the end, we ended up with abandonware. So where does that leave me right now? The thing that I've been working on for the last week is that I took one of the pieces of abandonware. Because like I said, it was so ingrained in my project that I just could not get rid of it. Like I had to live with this thing and still have to live with it. Now my next project, I will make sure to not weave stuff like that so deeply into the project itself. But it's a lesson learned, and the lesson that I'm teaching to you or telling to you so that you can learn too. And in this case, I have been working on this project. I took it amongst myself, brought it to myself and basically said, okay, people, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna make it so that everybody else who used this product can also use this product. Get it to a nice stable point and put it out there for free, because when they abandoned it and it became abandonware, they threw the code out and said, we're done, we're wiping our hands clean of this, you guys can do what you want. And so they made a Git repository, and they're like, you guys can do what you want, go for it. I think there was a license issue, especially since some of the things that you could use with it you had to pay for, and so there's like some little niggly little things that make some of it a little difficult, but for the most part, it's out there and you can do whatever you want with it. So I brought it in because I weighed the possibility of switching to something else. I looked at the possibility of just using it as it was, and I decided that the simplest thing, if I wanted to save lots of time, was just to simply bring it in and edit it and build on it myself. And that's the way it is. And for the last week or two, I have been working on that almost exclusively. Like that particular piece of middleware, I've been working on it pretty much exclusively. I haven't really worked on my game specific, even though this thing is related to working on my game, because I need that piece to work appropriately so I can make sure it works fine in my game. But I wanted to meet the potential of the product, and so I decided to bring it in, adjust it, and play with it, and get it in a good spot, and then put it out there so that other people can use it and be happy using it, and it'll work just fine in their project. That's what I felt like the original guys should have done, but they didn't. So here we are. And so I've lost a whole lot of time waiting. So this particularly long blog post is really a cautionary tale. It is something that you need to consider and should take into consideration when you are working on your own game and you are trying to decide whether or not you're going to use some middleware. Middleware is great. Middleware can be a major lifesaver. However, do so responsibly. Always look at reviews, talk to other developers, decide for yourself whether or not you are going to get that thing and how entwined it's going to be into your project. Because that can save you all kinds of time later if they decide that they want to abandon and it becomes abandonware. And I've talked to a lot of game developers who have had similar problems where you bought something and you brought it in and now that particular thing doesn't work because now it's abandonware, or you needed certain things done. They promised, oh yeah, we're going to do X and Y and Z and we're going to do all this. And they promised the world, and in the end, you're left with promises not kept. And so I want you to really, really think about this as you are working on your own project. And so with that, I want to say thanks a lot for sticking around and listening to my long-winded discussion about middleware, what it is and why you would use it, because it does save a lot of time and a lot of work, but it can also be really detrimental and really hurt your project in the long run. So use middleware responsibly and really think about what it is that you're getting into before you actually get into it. And yes, it looks so enticing when you're trying to find a first-person controller, first-person shooter controller, and you are looking on the Unity Asset Store and some guy has one that's already written. It allows you to use NPCs, it allows you to create your own weapons, it allows you to do all that stuff, and you think, wow, I just throw that into my project. I'll just be able to make whatever, right? I'll make my first-person shooter. It's great. I can do that. Until you load it in your project and start using it and realize all the little faults. And then you find that maybe the developer just isn't as responsive as you thought. Or the other thing is maybe they don't speak your language well enough for you to understand what actually is going on. There are lots of little things that happen with that. So just be careful. And on that, I want to thank everybody again. So make sure that if you like these discussions to subscribe and ring the notification bell and leave comments down below, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at them and we can have a nice little conversation. If you are a game developer and you have similar experiences, please leave your experiences down below. I'd love to read them. I follow game development pretty closely. I love game development. And so I'd love to hear people's stories about positive experiences, but also the negative ones. So I don't want this to be a total negative video, and I really don't want this to stop you from using middleware, because middleware is good. But I do want to hear other people's comments and what you think about it and what's your take. And yeah, let's have a little discussion about that. So this is Garv. I'm signing out. You guys have a great day and a great week. And I look forward to the next video. Peace out, people.